So you have all the three powers, so to say, legislative, executive and juridical power, all under one green copper roof. I understand that's the only place in the world where that's the case. But then symbolically, because this was built by the Danish people, all the granite stones on the facade here was delivered by municipalities in Denmark. Here in the parliament we have, it's the social democrats, the workers that are at power in Denmark. In Denmark you can vote when you're 18 and you are votable to the parliament when you're 18, and that's because they say, because we have to do military service, we also have to be able to have influence on the decisions. We have 179 members of our parliament, so when you're prime minister in Denmark, you have to be very good at counting to 90, because that's when you have majority. But we have 2 from Greenland and 2 from Faroe Islands. You know, they have home ruling, but they're part of Denmark. Look at the 4 reliefs over the doors. They are symbolizing the hard daily work. The Danes love to call them the Danish taxpayers because they look like they're suffering. But I must say, after 20 years abroad, I'm surprised with how little difficulties that the Danes accept the high taxes. It's as they really appreciate the security it gives in case you lose your work or you're taken ill, that somebody is looking after you. They do it with a little black humor, but
what's the tax?
If you are a worker in Denmark, you would pay 40% tax. Yeah.
Your sales tax is 22%?
25. Oh, we have other incomes. We have the oil and the gas in the North Sea. Yes. We have plenty of oil and gas. It was actually the Norwegians first who struck oil out in the North Sea. And we Danes, we were very jealous. We called the Norwegians the blue-eyed Arabs. But then in the 70s, when we had the energy crisis, Denmark invested more money in searching for oil, drilling for oil, and we struck oil. And today we have plenty. We can even export also gas.
We continued walking with our guide through the grounds of Christiansborg Palace into this kind of hidden and beautiful library garden.
The building that you have ahead of you is today our National Archives, but that was originally built in 1600 for the Royal Library, and then later on they built in 1905 the Royal Library that you have behind you, and as you notice, the Black Diamond, which is the recent annex to our Royal Library. The park was actually a warship harbor for our King Christian IV. He was the king, remember, that built the Rosenborg Castle, also the Round Tower, most of the Renaissance buildings you see in Copenhagen. You don't have to remember all the Christians and the Fredericks, but Christian IV you have to remember when you've been to Copenhagen. He was a very productive king. He also had 23 children. He had his warships in here, and then he built over here to the left this building for the cannons, which is today our arms museum, but that's where he had the gunpowder and all the weapons to furnish his ships. Can I just say to you, if you don't think that your guide is telling you the truth, that you don't think that this was ever a harbor, then you should look behind the bench here to the left, because there's one of those metal rings where you used to tie the boat up in the harbor, yeah. So I can prove it. It's not a guide story. And on purpose, he built the houses so big, so tall, because he didn't want the Swedish spies to see, so that they could count the masts of the ships, so they knew how many warships he had in here. Do you know that the Swedes and the Danes, we have had a very special relationship? We have had running wars against each other for 134 years altogether. Just because we Danes have tried to convince the Swedes that they were part of Denmark, but we didn't have too much success in it. I must say today we absolutely live in harmony with our neighbors, the Swedes. It's only once a year when we have the soccer match. That's war between our countries. You are having a statue to your left. That is Soren Kierkegarde. That's the Danish philosopher. I don't know if you have heard about him, from the Golden Age. You know, the Golden Age in Denmark is the first half of 1800. And then the English came back 6 years later, and they bombed our city. And then in 1813 we lost Norway. Norway was part of Denmark for 400 years, and then in 14 we went bankrupt, and then we lost a third of Denmark, Schleswig-Holstein, to the Germans, and this is what we call the golden period in our history, because as so often before when it's hard times, then we have the best the most creative people come out. The best painters we have from that period, Soren Kierkegarde, the philosopher, H.C. Andersen, the fairy tale writer, also Ørsted, who found the electromagnetism. I don't know that much about electromagnetism, but it's the basis for the computers and the telephones that we use so much today. So it was an important period in the Danish history. I wonder if you had the patience if I told you the history of Copenhagen. I will tell you the short version, 2 minutes. But you are here on an island where Copenhagen was founded. This is underneath Christiansborg that the Bishop Absalon had built a fortress. We know that for sure because we found it in 1907, the ruins underneath. And in 1167 he had built the fortress, and then we know it was here for 200 years. Then came the Hanseates, those northern Germans. They were traders just like we were, and also in our waters. And they meant serious business. They brought 50 mansoners, and then they come up to Copenhagen and they tore down the fortress of Absalon into ruins. And on top of those ruins in 1300, that's where they built the Copenhagen castle, where our kings, Christian and Frederick has lived. And then in 1731, we got an absolute ruling king. He was called Christian VI. He took the Copenhagen castle that his father had just used 6 years to modernize and make beautiful. He tore it down and built what was the biggest castle in Northern Europe. Unfortunately, the castle burned, not even 60 years later. And then they built the second Christiansborg, which unfortunately burned, 1884. Yeah, we were never very good at taking care of our castles. And then in 1928, this third Christiansborg that you're looking at here was ready. So it's not an old castle. And it's not built by any absolute ruling king, but it's built by the Danish people. Let's go and find our bus, because we have to profit now when we have it.
You're watching Hawaii Geographic Society's World Traveler. We photographed this during our regular tours of Europe and bring it back to you as episodes for World Traveler. This is part of our tour of Scandinavia and Russia. We started out in St. Petersburg a few weeks ago, traveled through Scandinavia, and we're ending up in beautiful Copenhagen. Continuing along on the bus, we pass one of the leading attractions.
You see the main entrance to Tivoli? That's our amusement park, Tivoli. It's 150 years old. And what do you find in there? Yeah, you have 40 restaurants, many more amusements. You have only live music. You have 200,000 flowers. And Tivoli was really built because somebody felt that Copenhagen was much too boring. So they went to the king, you had to do that in those days, and asked if they could build an amusement park far out of the city center. And now, as you see, it's right in the middle.
We'll take you inside later.
Ahead of you, you have one of the two centers we have in Copenhagen. This is the King's new square. It was the same king, Christian, who was a very big admirer of the Sun King of France, Louis XIV. So he came back from Paris and said, such a square as they have in Paris, I'm going to build in Copenhagen as well. And in all modesty, as you can see, he put a statue of himself in the middle. You know, Denmark has been a member of the European Union since 1973, and the environment has very high priority in Denmark. So we were quite pleased when we succeeded in getting the agency to Copenhagen last year. Here ahead of you, the big white building is called Hotel d'Angleterre. That's the most fashionable hotel we have.
The Hotel d'Angleterre is a beautiful place. It's got a nice old-fashioned lobby, and yet, of course, the rooms are thoroughly modernized. This is 5-star deluxe hotel right in the center of town on the King's New Square.
Here, after the d'Angleterre on your right-hand side, you see the walking street Strøget. That connects where we are now, the King's New Square, with the Town Hall Square at the other end. Here to the right is the Royal Theatre we're just passing by. We have quite a well-known Royal Ballet in Copenhagen. And then the red brick building here to your right-hand side. This is the Royal Academy. That's where we educate our young artists.
We continue on the tour with our guide for about 3 hours, It's on and off the bus. We're heading now for the Royal Palace to have a look at the changing of the guards and learn some about the royal family and their history. And we're visiting the Mermaid. We're visiting the different parts of town on the bus and off the bus. It's a nice way to get an overview of the city.
And this part of the city we're going into now is called the Frederick City. And that was a gift from the King Frederick back in 1749. Because our king said, I would like to celebrate that my family has been ruling Denmark for 300 years. So he donated this new city. Ahead of you to the left, there is 3 golden onion-shaped towers. This is the Russian church, a gift from the Tsar Alexander III because he was married to a Danish princess. You will see to your left-hand side the Frederick's Church, and to the right-hand side the Amalienborg Royal Palace. Then we'll go down and visit the Queen's Royal Palace. The palace that you have here behind you is where our Queen lives. Queen Margaret II with her husband, the Prince Consort. Because they have a little tradition at the Amalienborg Palace where you live when you're Crown Prince is also the palace that you would stay in when you're King of Denmark. And our 33-year-old Crown Prince Frederik, he lives in the palace that you have over here to the right ahead of you. And he has a younger brother who's called Joachim, who has his degree in agriculture, and he's married to a young English woman who was brought up in Hong Kong. Her father is half Chinese and her mother is Austrian, so she's really an exotic flower in the royal family. She is 5 years older than her husband, Alexander. She's a tiny little pretty woman and very bright. She picked up Danish. Within 3 months she spoke it. Within 6 months she was really fluent. Of course, this really took the Danes by the heart, that she was so good at integrating. And the Queen decided when they married that she was called Alexandra Manley, that she should be Princess Alexandra, and she should have an elephant order as well. And then the 4th palace, which looks so much more beautiful than the other 3, that's the guest palace. This is where the head of state would be staying when they come for a visit. We had for the first time ever an American president in office visiting, William Jefferson Clinton. 24 hours he was here. But these 4 palaces were not at all built for the royal family. They were built by 4 Danish noblemen, all friends of our King Frederick, who sits up here looking like a Roman emperor. The statue I should mention, because they say it's one of the 3 best statues in the world. And it's good so, because it actually cost 10 times more than one palace when it was made. It has just been restored a couple of years ago, and he was telling me how they had problems with the condensed water inside the statue. But you know what he also said? In the belly of the horse we can sit 5 architects and have breakfast. It doesn't look that big from down here, does it? And then at the end here, ahead of you, you have the Frederick's Church, or we also call it the Marble Church. And the king said in those days, the church I'm going to build myself. But he very soon had problems because he had built about 10 meters up in the air in Norwegian marble. And then he had no money left. He was bankrupt, so we had a ruin in the middle of Copenhagen. It looked lovely, a little like in Rome. For 150 years we had the ruin, and then the richest man in Denmark, he finished the church.
So what's happening with the guards now?
They have already done, the change in front of each palace. They started at 12 o'clock, but there's no music. When the Queen is home, they bring music. They are on guard for 24 hours. Yeah, not out here, only 2 hours out in front, then they go in the back for 4 hours, and they come back out 2 hours. And they do that for 24 hours. And the change of the guard is 12 o'clock. And it's in front of all the 4 palaces. Now they walk back. They are the used ones. They have been here for 24 hours. Now they walk back to the barracks, which is next to Rosenborg Castle. But you can see they all have little red pom-poms.
Yes.
So they are belong to the same company. And these ones who are standing over here now, who took over, they have a different color. The royal family moved in here, you know, when the Christiansborg Palace burned down. They had 50,000 square meters at Christiansborg. Here in such a palace, they only have 4,000 square meters, which is like 40,000 square feet. So you can see it hasn't been easy for them. They really had to narrow the belt when they came here. And then they connected these two buildings. This is actually up here. You can walk with no difficulty, 5 people next to each other. And that's where the Queen can go over and visit her guests in the other palace. And this is made of wood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The yellow palace that you have coming up here on your left-hand side, this is the Queen's office. You know how much it cost the Danes to have a queen? It cost us 10 kroner, which is a little more than $1 per Dane per year. The president would be much more expensive, but I don't think the Danes have the queen for economical reasons. As I mentioned, she's very popular. And she's an intelligent woman also, that helps an awful lot. How do you educate yourself to become queen? Our queen has been studying a lot of different subjects. Political science, archaeology, law. Also the queen is very artistic, she paints, she makes costumes for the royal ballet, she speaks 5 languages. I would say she is very well prepared for her job. Yeah, and she has often said that she's saving a lot of time because she doesn't have to do the vacuum cleaning herself. We will go in the shade here on the left side.
Continuing along on the bus tour with our local guide, learning more of the interesting tidbits about Copenhagen.
I mentioned 88% of the Danes are Lutheran Protestants and 3% of the Danes are Catholics. And then the rest of the Danes are spread between 24 different religions. To the right, which looks like a lovely park, it is also, but it was originally built as a fortification in 1660 to protect Copenhagen from the worst of all enemies, the Swedes. There are no political secrets in there anymore. You're welcome just to walk in.
And then we continue along, heading for the last major destination of our bus tour, the famous Mermaid of Copenhagen.
And she was a gift from the brewer of Carlsberg beer. You have to know when you're drinking a Carlsberg beer, you're supporting our culture in Denmark. He had been the brewer to the Royal Theatre, and he had seen the ballet based on the fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen of the Little Mermaid. And he got so touched by the ballet that he asked the artist, the sculptor Edvard Eriksen, to make a Little Mermaid from Copenhagen. And it brings you good luck to touch the fishtail of the mermaid. I would like to warn you, it might also bring you wet shoes. In here to the right is the King's Park, or maybe I should say the People's Park. It's a very popular park area, especially now when it's such a beautiful weather. And in the middle of the park you have a palace which is called Rosenborg Palace. No royalty is living in there, but that's today the chronological museum of the Danish kings. It's built Renaissance style, so typical for Copenhagen. These red bricks and the white sandstone ribbons and the green copper roof. Much more colorful than the Renaissance buildings you find in Southern Europe. If you want to go and see the crown jewelries or the throne or the crown.
And then our bus took us right back into the heart of town.
We're going to take you now as close as we can to the walking street, just about the middle of the walking street, Strøget. This is where you have the fountain of the stork. You can see it here coming up in front of you. And behind the fountain you have a white building where it says George Jensen on the facade. That's a silversmith, George Jensen. And then the Renaissance building to the left of George Jensen, that is where you can buy the Danish royal porcelain. You have Illums Bolighus, that's a home furnishing store. If you do like Scandinavian design, I would say Illums Bolighus is a must. These 4 shops are also interconnected, so in case it should start raining in the afternoon, which I don't think it will, but then you will not get wet because you can go from one store to the other.
The best shops with high quality clothing, electronics, souvenirs, jewelry, restaurants, and cafes are in the section of Strøget between Gammertorv with its dolphin fountain and on towards the King's New Square. In the center at the Dolphin Fountain, you will find an especially strong lineup of 4 major retail names in a row. George Jensen Silverware Shop, the Royal Copenhagen Porcelain Shop, Holmegard Glass, and Elam's Boligas Home Furnishings with an excellent display of Scandinavian design. These 4 stores are interconnected, so you can walk from one to the next without stepping outside. Together they make up a stunning display of Danish goods at their very best. And then finally it's time to say goodbye to our local guide.
How do you pronounce your last name? Anita?
Vystavel.
Vystavel.
That's Czech, and it means we are building. Yeah.
Okay. Your husband is Czech.
He's Swede, born in Italy from Austrian parents, but it's Austria.
That's quite a combination.